Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and today I'm taking a look at Spintires. Now, Spintires is a game made by Uvi, which is a UK-based developer, and it's a game about off-roading. Specifically, it seems to be like a very realistic off-roading simulator, but one that still plays like a game, and gotta say, it's quite the addictive game, at least from my point of view. So just have a quick look at the settings. There are actually quite a lot of these over here. Or at least you have some of the main options that you would be looking for. So things like SSAO, you can have motion blur on. I like having the motion blur on because it seems to also affect the depth of field, which I kind of like. So I leave that on. Normally I'd switch it off because it is kind of annoying, but in this case it's not so bad. Plus the game doesn't move that fast. So there's that. Sound level, I'm just going to turn that down just a little bit. And yeah. Controls are actually quite simple. You can have keyboard or you can have a 360 gamepad. I'm not sure if you can use a PlayStation controller with this, but I suppose you would be able to use most gamepads. I've not tried it yet. But apparently racing wheel support will be coming in the future as well, so there is that. But this controls pretty well on the keyboard, actually. Most of these controls are pretty familiar. WAS and D for movement. You've got your gear control with R, although you can use automatic, so that's not really too much of an issue. E and Q for your all-wheel drive and locking differential and stuff. Yeah, it's all pretty easy to reach. In fact, this is the sort of game you can actually play with just one hand, because unless you have to move the camera, which I'll get onto in a moment. So let's just hit continue. I actually have a game already in progress, and it's actually saved that. And it's dropped us in at night time. Fantastic. Let's just close that. We don't need any of that. I'll just put the parking brake on, or it's going to roll. So what we have here is, well, it's Russian. That's the first thing. It's a sort of heavy-duty lorry of some sort. And we're carrying lumber. So how the game's played, you hit F1 and you got this map. The map's actually pretty big. Alright, you start off at a garage and you have just one vehicle to choose from. One, maybe two, it depends. Some maps give you more, some give you less. And you have an overall objective. So in this case, I have to bring lumber from this corner of the map down to the bottom, which is the objective. And there's a certain amount of lumber that I need to bring. Now, this is not actually like measured in logs or anything. There's a load points that the actual cargo has. So depending on what sort of size of cargo you carry, it has different amount of points allocated to it. So there you go. And there's all of this in between that we have to carry across to. At the same time, there's also fuel points around the map. So you can either head back to a garage for repairs and fuel, or you can head to a fuel point and just refuel there. And it's quite important because not all of the trucks actually have enough fuel capacity to actually make it all the way across the map, especially on some really rough terrain where you start consuming a lot more fuel than you would expect to. Again, let's close that. We don't need that. Okay, so how does the game control? Well, I'm going to show you in a minute. And you're already seeing the camera controls are fiddly as all hell. Okay, so A and D controls your steering. And on a lot of the vehicles, it just controls the steering angle and it kind of stays that way. So if I was to just hit accelerate now, we get stuck. Right, okay, so that gives me a moment to actually talk about the terrain system. So there is actually a really realistic terrain deformation system, which you're actually seeing a lot of down here. I've actually traveled along this road quite a lot. So a lot of these track marks aren't just molded into the ground. They're not pre-made. These are actually made by the game, by these lorries that go up and down the roads. So how are we going to get out of this? Now, if anyone has any off-roading experience, it's actually quite useful here because it does simulate it reasonably effectively. I know the purists are going to disagree with me. What we're going to do is we'll switch our all-wheel drive on and see if that helps. It seems to, but we seem to have a problem because not all the wheels have traction. So we're wasting quite a bit of power here. So what we're going to do is put the diff lock on and send all the power to all of the wheels, and let's get out of this little rut that we're stuck in. So for the most part, leaving the diff lock on is kind of like having your magical go anywhere button, and that's what it might seem like, and that's where I say the off-roading purists are definitely going to dislike the game, because that's kind of not how diff locks actually work. But for the most part, it does do what it needs to do. There is a downside to this though. Leaving these things on leads to quite a significant amount of fuel consumption. So as far as gameplay goes, it does actually kind of discourage leaving it on all the time. And some of the vehicles actually take additional damage if they were to hit certain parts of the vehicle while the diff locks are on. So again, there's pros and cons, and the game definitely doesn't want you to just leave it on and have that as sort of a cheating button, really. I have to point out that this game is not actually on a very recent engine. In fact, it's actually based on a lot of, from what I understand anyway, a lot of the graphical sort of coding comes from stuff that's based on DirectX 9, which is actually not the newest. I think we're up to DirectX 13 or 12 or 13 or something now. So, but yeah, a lot of the things were actually based on DirectX 9, which is heavily modified to what we see now. And I gotta say, it's not an ugly looking game. It actually is quite good looking. I mean, yes, there are some things like, for example, the mud building up on the tires doesn't look all that nice sometimes. But you know what, it could look a lot worse, and considering that you've got this sort of terrain deformation, let me just try and zoom in so you can actually see it. Come on, camera, work with me. So you can see right there just where the bumper is, actually the tires are moving through the mud, and they're actually changing the way the terrain works. Now, of course, it doesn't look so nice up close because the textures are getting stretched and all that, but you can see basically what I'm on about, where, you know, moving through deep mud kind of creates a new sort of thing, like a new track through it. So, and I've not seen a lot of games do this before. In fact, I can't think of a single AAA title that's out now that's still being played that has this sort of system, which is interesting. And definitely adds a lot to the realism of the game as well. Graphically, it's good, you know. We don't need to really say more about that. But how does the gameplay actually work? Well, I'd say having an overarching objective definitely helps. Of course, you could just go off, explore the map as you wish. The map actually starts off being cloaked in a sort of Command and Conquer-esque fog of war, if you will. And then you have to approach these sort of black tornadoes, is what they've been called. Black tornadoes around the map to actually reveal that location. And in doing so, you might find things like fuel depots or unlockable vehicles. And bear in mind, a lot of the vehicles that I have already unlocked started off being hidden, and you have to actually approach them to a certain proximity to actually use them. So they do give you a lot of sort of, I would say it's a side quest really, to go and do that. Now, of course, every driving game needs a sort of navigation system, because after all, you are going to get lost. And this game seems to have one, although it doesn't seem at any point to really tell you that. There is a help system which gives you tooltips around, but it doesn't seem to tell you about this. So if I click on the map here, it actually drops a waypoint down and tells me the distance. Now, at first glance, I thought this was just a measurement of distance. Like, I wanted to know how far away I was from this garage. It's 500 meters, apparently. Then I click OK, and I thought that was it. Until I realized, when you do this, and you just leave a few checkpoints around, something like that, and you close the map, you can see this red line just going through the actual ground. Of course, you know, so that's your navigation. So that's how that actually works. And hitting OK clears it. So it took a little bit of figuring out, but there you go. That's the actual navigation system and how that works. Now, the biggest gripe I have with this game, well, actually, there's two main problems I have with this game. As much as I like it, this camera control reminds me a lot of a Space Mouse, or a 3D Space Mouse. I don't know if many of you guys watching this have ever used a Space Mouse before, but it's basically if you have a sort of giant button and you push or tilt it in different directions to achieve different results. That's kind of what this is like using, but it seems to be translated to a normal PC mouse in a really strange way. So moving forward pushes the camera forward, but pulling it down just sort of tilts it downwards, and the only way you're going to get it back is to really sort of pull back. which is really strange. So if you want to zoom in and zoom out, you can either use the mouse wheel, but any forward movement will push it back again, so it gets a little bit annoying in that sense. And left and right pans the camera, as you would expect, but moving it to a certain degree pushes it to a different location, which is a little bit odd. I've got to say, it's a little bit odd. And then we've got your camera resets, so if you hit 1, it's focusing on the actual vehicle at the front, so and hitting it again actually rotates between forward and reverse view, which is sort of useful. Kind of, but it is affected by steering angle, so you can see the camera's actually moving when I steer, which can be a bit inconvenient. And then 2 seems to focus on the trailer, so if I want to see what I'm reversing into, I can do that, except there's no reverse view, so I actually have to pan around the rear axle in this way. So not the most convenient one. Also, this doesn't reset correctly either. So the camera controls are really cumbersome. So when you need to really do something, for example, if you have a boulder stuck underneath one of your axles, which inevitably happens, it's a bit difficult to get around. Also, for something with a really old graphical engine, you can actually see God rays and stuff appearing in the smoke right now, which is nice. But yeah, so the camera controls aren't actually the best. They are just cumbersome to use, and I'm about to roll over. And yes, this is one of the things that happens. You do roll over from time to time, and you do take damage. And when you overturn, you lose whatever you're carrying. So I've not actually been able to successfully deliver any lumber to where I needed to go yet. Nope. Not yet. And this is why, because this game is difficult. I'd say that's the nicest thing I can possibly say about it. It is difficult. Difficult, but addictive. So the most I can do right now is rescue back to the garage, which will give me an opportunity to show you some of the other stuff. So, as you notice, there's this crane at the front, which I can actually use. I should probably... I don't know much about how this actually works. I assume you're supposed to do that so that you raise the lorry. And I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, there we go. Okay, so there's that. Oh, okay. So, you know, it never actually told me that that's what how you do it. But yeah, I can't imagine what this is actually for. I have no idea. Maybe I can pick up this behind me. I've actually got no idea what this does. Could I open that? That's up and down. How do I extend it? So, yeah. So I'm just sort of booping this oil tanker on the head. Yeah. We can just hit restore on that, and that'll go back to folded position. But yeah, so that's one of the additional things that you can do. You have a crane. I'm not sure what it actually does. So we can actually switch vehicles now. There's two ways of doing it. We just hit the change truck and click next. So we can take over this one if we want to. Or if we go to the map, we can actually select another vehicle. I do actually want to show you the Jeep, because this is one of the more interesting ones, because it's very different. You don't carry cargo with this, and it's mostly used for exploring, I'd say. Can't imagine you'd want to use this for anything else. Which in multiplayer, yes, there is a multiplayer mode. This is actually probably one of the more fun ones, because you can just sort of fool around with this. Also, the maps are full of soft mud everywhere, and unless you've got a really keen eye, you're going to miss it. You're not going to see what's what. So, there we go, getting stuck. Diff locks on. That's not actually helped at all. I am actually well and truly stuck now. Yeah. But yes, it is a very punishing game, this. Alright, but that gets me on to the second gripe I have with this game, and I don't know if this is... There is a hardcore mode as well, and I don't know if this is actually available in the hardcore mode or not. It should be, but what this is, if you notice, there is very minimal HUD around. There's not much of a heads-up display at all, which is good. It doesn't clutter the screen that much. And I know a lot of people complain about the lack of a first-person view in this, but I hear there might be a first-person view coming in future. But we'll see how that goes, whether that's actually going to happen or not. Maybe if they get the funding to do it, they might do it. Who knows? But yeah, there isn't much of a heads-up display, and that's a good thing. It doesn't actually clutter the screen all that much. But there are a couple of elements that are missing from it that I think the game could probably benefit from having, or at least have it as an option if people want it. Number one, steering angle. Now, driving from first-person view, you can see your own steering wheel angle, and that's fine. You'd be able to tell, you know, where your wheels are pointing and all that, which is fine. It's perfectly alright. What I had a lot of problem with figuring out at the beginning was how to control the vehicle, because I couldn't see exactly where the wheels were pointing, and I ended up overcorrecting quite a lot. After a while, you do learn to do it by feel, but when you need to make very precise movements, it still becomes very problematic not being able to see exactly where your wheels are pointing. So having an indicator on the screen just to show what your steering angle is would be really useful. Additionally, things like a speedometer. Now, speed itself isn't all that important. This is a game that's designed to be played slowly and not quickly. Of course, you could try to use the Jeeps and do a rally race around if you want to, but ultimately it's not really about the speed that you're doing, and it's more about trying to keep your vehicle intact and use as little fuel as possible. It's really sort of that kind of off-roader's simulator, if you like. But a speedometer is still useful because you need to know, for example, if I'm approaching a river, I want to know if I can maintain a constant speed all the way across it, and I want to know what sort of speed I did it at last time. Having some sort of indicator such as that, even if it is just an arbitrary number, would be really useful. So if I enter the stream at 60 kilometers an hour, I would make a mental note of that, and the next time I would know to enter it at 60 kilometers an hour again, because that would be just useful. That would make more sense to me. But if not, I mean, people might disagree with that. You might not find a speedometer to be more useful than anything else. But what about a rev gauge, rev counter? I think that would be particularly useful as well. If you're trying to control how much fuel you're using, for more, I suppose, a more immersive experience, definitely you'd want to. Whoa, that was a bug. You'd want to keep a track of how hard you're pushing the engine, because that's where your fuel consumption is going to be anyway. And definitely if you're using manual gear shifting, which I'm not at the moment, you know, being able to do that, to measure your revs and control that effectively, would be, I would say, add to the experience quite a lot. So there are a couple of things that need to be added, I think, or at least have available as an option, which I just find is really sad that it's missing in this version. But, you know, it's something that could be added in future. One thing that's really nice about the heads-up display, actually, is this gear shifter they've got in the right-hand corner. Now, every time you click, of course, you got the arrow. So, if I want to access this, I just click the top of the lever, and I can shift this into any gear I want. And it actually shows me on the left over there what gear I'm in. So if I want to go into reverse, it's over here. Or if I want to, what's this? Can I go here? It's first gear. That's actually manual first, by the way, as opposed to this, which is automatic first. Slight difference. So if I put it into automatic, I don't need to change anything. Then there's first gear plus, of course. Don't ask me, I'm not an off-roader, so I have no idea what that actually means, what first gear plus is. But yeah. But this is what the single player is all about, really, and this is casual mode. So casual mode is, of course, a more relaxed experience. You can rescue back to the garage. Sorry, there's a lot of physics bugs going on. There's rocks appearing on the screen sometimes. But yeah, the single player experience is in casual mode is definitely a very relaxed sort of game. Even though it's tough, you don't have to worry about it all that much. There are a couple of physics bugs that I have noticed, and there's a couple of bugs with the terrain as well, but and I suppose in due time these sort of things will be ironed out. In the meantime, I iron it out for them by running over it. Yeah, I have seen bugs with physics and the winch especially. There's a winch function which is quite useful, but it has led to lorries flinging themselves across the map, and while funny, it's not exactly ideal. No, and it seems to happen quite a lot in the multiplayer mode as well. So the multiplayer mode especially is definitely a good addition to this game because you can do convoys, where if you're playing hardcore anyway, you'd be able to help refuel each other and repair each other along the way, and definitely make it a real teamwork effort, which definitely would be a very interesting experience. I think at least once everybody would like to try doing that. I don't know how big the market appeal for this sort of off-roading game would be, but definitely it seems like something I would definitely be very interested in trying at some point. But as a single player, there are a couple of things that just don't seem to be possible without a second vehicle around. So having to swap around with vehicles after a while does get a little bit tedious and does detract from the experience. I'm not suggesting that they should have AI vehicles at all, because I think that would just make things worse. I don't think, unless it's a very sophisticated AI, they'd be able to handle this. But yeah, and that's enough rambling, really. Ultimately, I think that this is a sort of game that there is quite a broad target audience that could get into this. Definitely if you're somebody who's ever been interested in off-roading, here it is. This is a really good way of getting into it in a video game sense, because this does still play like a game. Don't get me wrong, this is not an off-road simulator by any stretch of the imagination. It has the hallmarks of one, definitely, by having realistic enough handling, but it's not a simulator, because you can still just play this as a game. Like right now, I'm not even touching the camera very much. I'm just using my keyboard and just driving along, and it's just a very relaxed sort of driving game. I can just drive this Jeep all over the place and pretend I'm on safari. That's if that's what I want to do, fine. And I could even sink the Jeep if I so choose by not looking where I'm going. But yes, there's something that's going to happen quite a lot. So there it is, Spintires, everybody. Available on Steam now for $29.99 US, or your regional equivalent. This has been Panzer. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.
Ultimate.